The buildings were already failing before the earthquake ever hit. Cracks in the floors, walls separating from their foundations, towers visibly leaning, pipes bursting inside structures that had never even experienced a major seismic event. Engineers warning publicly that a stronger earthquake would bring them down. Nobody listened. And on June 25th, the earthquake came. What happened in Venezuela is being called a natural disaster. And the earthquake itself, yes, that was natural.
A street festival in La Guaira, 4 minutes after 6 on Wednesday evening. Across a wide swath of Venezuela, buildings began to crumble.
A fault line that had been locked and loading for decades finally released, and the ground shook for nearly 2 full minutes across one of the most populated regions of the country. But what happened to the buildings is a different story entirely. And that story did not begin on June 25th. It began years ago in government housing programs, construction contracts, hidden structural plans, and a system where the engineers who were supposed to protect people were never allowed to see the blueprints. That is what this video is about. Subscribe and turn on notifications if you are not already, because this story is going to keep developing. And when new information comes out, you will want to hear it here first. Let us start with what we know about the earthquake itself.
Hemos visto demasiado. Y luchando para sacar a los niños con la esperanza de conseguirlo vivo. Sacamos a uno, eran los 3, pero sacamos uno que salió vivo, gracias a Dios, pero ellos no llegamos. En ellos no llegamos.
Because even the basic facts are more complicated than the initial headline suggested. When the first reports came in, the USGS classified this as 2 separate earthquakes, a magnitude 7.2, followed 39 seconds later by a magnitude 7.5. 2 strikes within less than a minute. But a new analysis from Geoscope, the global seismological observatory operated by the Institut de Physique du Globe de Paris, tells a different story. Their source time function analysis suggests this was not 2 earthquakes at all. It was one single, extraordinarily complex rupture event with a moment magnitude of 7.8, producing several distinct pulses of energy over approximately 2 minutes, propagating eastward along the northern Venezuelan fault zone. One continuous, 2-minute-long catastrophe. And that distinction matters enormously, because a 7.8 is not just slightly bigger than a 7.5. On the logarithmic magnitude scale, the difference is staggering. The seismic waves, the actual ground shaking, are approximately 2 times stronger, and the total energy released is roughly 2.8 times greater. Nearly 3 times more energy tearing through the ground beneath Caracas for 2 uninterrupted minutes. The confirmed death toll stands at over 300, with more than 4,300 injured. Rescue teams are still working through collapsed structures, and every hour that number climbs. Thousands are missing. Thousands more are sleeping in their cars or in the streets, too afraid to go back inside buildings that may not survive an aftershock. And aftershocks are still coming. A major earthquake does not end when the shaking stops. The fault system continues to adjust, releasing stress in smaller events that can still reach magnitude 5, 6, or higher. And a magnitude 6 aftershock hitting a city full of already compromised structures.
Sin comer, sin dormir. Pero aquí estamos. Hasta conseguir hasta lo último que estamos buscando.
Buildings with fractured foundations, separated load-bearing walls, cracked columns can finish what the main event started. Rescue workers searching through the rubble know this. They are working in collapsing buildings while the ground beneath them is still moving. But here is the question that the seismic data alone cannot answer. Why did so many buildings fail? Venezuela is not a country that was unaware of its earthquake risk. The northern coastal fault system that runs through this region is well documented. Geologists have known for generations that this part of South America is capable of producing large, dangerous earthquakes. In fact, Venezuela had a very direct warning. On July 29, 1967, a magnitude 6.5 earthquake struck just north of Caracas. It lasted approximately 30 seconds. In those 30 seconds, 4 high-rise apartment buildings collapsed completely. 270 people died. In the aftermath of 1967,
3 days of official mourning are declared as rescue workers continue to sift through the wreckage, searching for victims. Catastrophe in Caracas.
Venezuela committed to earthquake-resistant construction. New building codes were introduced. Seismic zoning requirements were established. The intention was clear. What happened in 1967 would never happen again. But intentions do not build buildings. Enforcement does. Oversight does. Independent inspections do. And in the decades that followed, as Venezuela's political and economic situation deteriorated, the gap between what the building codes required and what was actually being built grew wider and wider. By 2017, 8 years before this earthquake, the warning signs were already visible and already being documented publicly. A Venezuelan investigative outlet reported that year that experts were refusing to guarantee the quality of buildings constructed under the Gran Mission Vivienda Venezuela program, the government's flagship social housing initiative that built hundreds of thousands of apartments across the country. The report described towers already showing cracks, settlements, and visible tilting, structural calculations hidden from independent review.
Efforts. The mindset which we arrived here is basically to provide help for the wounded that are already rescued.
He lost several family members in Wednesday's earthquakes, but he's putting aside his pain for now, focusing instead on others.
Soil studies either missing entirely or never made public. Local engineers unable to access the architectural plans for buildings that hundreds of families were living in. The president of the Venezuelan Engineers Association said publicly that his organization had no official information about the structural calculations of the Mission Vivienda buildings. What they knew came from field reports, from residents calling to say that walls were cracking, that floors were splitting, that their buildings were moving in ways that buildings should not move. An organization called Transparencia Venezuela issued warnings about missing risk studies and corruption throughout the housing program. Developments built without required feasibility studies, without proper construction oversight, with no transparent process for selecting contractors or reviewing their work. And then there were the specific incidents. At El Morro de Petare, after a much smaller earthquake in 2017, residents reported that walls had collapsed, cracks had opened across floors and corridors, main structural beams had separated, pipes had burst, and one building was visibly sinking and leaning. Civil protection officials warned residents at the time that a stronger and longer earthquake could cause the buildings to collapse entirely. That warning was issued 8 years ago. On June 25, 2026, the stronger and longer earthquake arrived. Now, the question of who built these buildings and how is one that investigates.
Horrible. Hemos visto demasiado. Y luchando para sacar a los niños con la esperanza de conseguirlo vivo. Sacamos a uno, eran los tres, pero sacamos uno que salió vivo, gracias a Dios, pero ellos no llegamos. En ellos no llegamos.
Investigators are going to be working on for months. But there are facts on the record that are worth understanding. The Mission Vivienda Venezuela program involved contractors from multiple countries, Russia, Belarus, and China, specifically Chinese state-linked construction firms who built a significant portion of the program's output. CITIC Construction, a major Chinese state-owned enterprise, publicly documented on its own website that it signed contracts to build 20,000 apartments across 1.73 million square meters in Venezuela. It later signed an additional contract for 13,000 apartments across 116 residential buildings in the Tuca development.
A small sign of hope days after the earthquakes.
But you still have hope of finding people alive.
I think it's difficult, but we have a chance to find some people alive.
The UN says rescue workers here have seen horrific damage. 10 years of intense economic crisis and mismanagement have left this oil-rich country with a limit.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro personally attended a 2017 handover ceremony for the Tuca project and praised CITIC's contribution to the housing program. It is critical to be clear about what this does and does not mean. The specific towers that collapsed in the June 25th earthquake have not yet been conclusively linked to any single contractor. The investigation is ongoing. The rubble is still being cleared. Attribution will take time. But here is the broader question that investigators were already asking years before this earthquake, and that is now more urgent than ever. When a foreign contractor designs and builds a housing complex, they typically work from standardized engineering systems. Tower designs developed and costed for a specific set of conditions. Those designs can be efficient and economical and delivered quickly. But seismic engineering is not standardized across countries. The ground conditions beneath Caracas are not the same as the ground conditions in Beijing or Moscow. The fault systems beneath northern Venezuela create specific localized patterns of ground shaking that require specific engineering responses. Foundations need to be designed for those conditions. Structural reinforcements need to account for the frequency and duration of shaking that this specific region produces. Adapting a standard building design to meet stringent seismic requirements is expensive. In some cases, meeting proper seismic codes can increase the cost of a building by 20, 30, or even 40%. The question is whether the foreign contractors who built these towers ever made those adaptations. Whether the designs were ever reviewed by qualified local structural engineers, whether the soil beneath each building site was ever properly studied, and the fact that contracts were not openly bid, that plans were not available for independent review, that the Engineers Association had no access to structural data, does not answer the question, but it explains why the question cannot yet be answered. What is not in question is the human cost. Hundreds of thousands of people have been displaced.
Shaking stopped, the scale of destruction came into view. Desperate survivors and a desperate search for the missing. Through the night, rescuers dug through debris, finding bodies and occasionally small miracles. I was in my building for 4 hours until I was rescued, says this man.
Hospitals are overwhelmed. The Simón Bolívar International Airport has been closed due to earthquake damage, creating a severe bottleneck for international aid. Venezuelans living abroad have been mobilizing to send supplies and support, but with the main airport shut and road networks disrupted by landslides, getting that aid to the people who need it is a logistical crisis on top of a humanitarian one. The United States has pledged $150 million in aid. Turkey, which experienced its own catastrophic earthquake sequence in February 2023, in a collapse pattern that raised many of the same questions about construction quality, has been in direct contact with Venezuela about assistance.
And the Venezuelan people have shown many times that they are friends of our nation. As two friendly countries, we have always prioritized and valued solidarity with each other during difficult times. We are acting with the same understanding today.
This is the strongest earthquake to strike Venezuela since 1900. If the geoscope analysis is confirmed and the final magnitude is recorded as 7.8, it will be the most powerful earthquake in Venezuelan recorded history. But the scientific record will eventually be settled. What will take much longer to settle is the human question, whether the people of Caracas were failed not just by a fault line, but by the systems that were supposed to protect them from it, by the contractors who may have cut corners, by the officials who may have looked the other way, by the engineers whose warnings were ignored for 8 years. The earthquake lasted 2 minutes. The decisions that determined what survived and what did not were made over decades. This story is far from over. As new information emerges about the specific buildings, the specific contractors, and the specific failures that turned a geological event into a human catastrophe of this scale, updates will follow immediately. If you want to understand the seismic science behind this event in more detail, that video is linked at the end of this one. Watch it next. Subscribe and hit the bell, because the most important part of this story has not come out yet.